Awesome. Welcome everybody to our first, hopefully many podcast sessions that we're going to be having with some of our amazing FIA youth and parent leaders. Today, we're going to start off with our first ever podcast, which is FIA Talks, Thoughts on School Closures. For the past month or so now, Oakland has been going through a lot of, tough times, especially when we think about these school closures here. There's definitely some students and families who are being impacted by it. And we want to, give our youth a platform to really speak on this issue and see where some of them, lie. Some of them stand on this issue. That being said, before I go ahead and introduce some of our amazing youth leaders, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Javier Barraza, and I'm the youth organizer here with Families in Action. And I've been doing youth organizing for a few years now, with the sole purpose to really empower students from our community. These three students are really a product of the work that I really try to do. That being said, let's get it started and go ahead and introduce some of these students. So first off, I really want to go ahead and introduce one of our OGs, Carla Bonilla. I'm gonna go ahead and bring her on here. And Carla, welcome to our first ever podcast, girl.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be
You're
here.
joining us from your dorm room, which is great.
I
Right?
am. Yeah.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, Carla.
Okay, so my name is Carla Bonilla. I am a FIA youth leader that has been involved with FIA for about a year and a half now. A little bit about, myself and kind of like my story of self. I was born and raised in El Salvador and moved at the age of 11. And from there, I faced a lot of educational barriers that kind of clouded, the idea of ever making it to a really big university. Thankfully, I was able to find a school by my choice and the choice of my parents that allowed me to kind of build a path. And now I am Oakland Unity High alumni and a student at UC Berkeley studying economics and international business management.
Look at
I'm very
you.
happy to be here.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Carla, for taking a moment to introduce yourself. That being said, let's go ahead and introduce one of our other OGs, Stephanie Velasquez. Hey, girl.
Hey y'all, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Hey Carla. Just as Javi was saying, my name is Stephanie Velasquez and I'm a senior at Oakland High School. This is, I want to say, my second year with FIA. As a FIA youth leader, I've really learned about the power in youth voice and kind of just how important self-advocacy is. I am interested in, advocacy, and as a student that has been in both the traditional and public charter system, I understand how important choice is in our communities. And I really think that I am a product of that, and I'm a product of my parents' choice. I've just finished applying to, universities, and admissions are rolling in, and I'm very excited to see where I end up. But as of now, I just would like to continue this work and just see, how we can empower our youth more here in Oakland.
Yes, super excited for that, and we definitely have to throw you a little party or something, girl, when you end up finding what school you go to. That being said, let's go ahead and introduce our last, but not least, and one of our newest youth leaders who's really been killing it lately, Benjamin Ceja.
Hello, how y'all doing?
What's up, bro? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Benjamin Ceja. I'm a sophomore at Oakland Union High School, and I was lucky enough to choose that high school. I like it because it's so small and you get to really figure it out with people, and everybody knows you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I have personal experience with school closures, and also I can relate to them.
Awesome. So we're in for a great conversation, right? And just to go over really quick the purpose, right? The purpose of today's conversation is to talk about the vote that basically is going to lead to two Oakland Unified schools being closed within this year, and that's Parker and Community Day. And then also in the next 5 year, there's going to be another bunch that are going to close, which is Korematsu, Brookfield, Grass Valley, Horseman, Carl B. Monk, and something else that's going to be happening is that Rise and New Highland is going to be merged with Hillcrest and La Escuelita. And oh, sorry, no, Hillcrest and La Escuelita are actually going to cut their middle school programs, which is like crazy, right? So it's definitely a big change. And I mean, I'm not saying that it came out of nowhere, right? But it's something that came out of nowhere to some of our families and some of our community of Oakland. And because of this vote, there was we saw like an immediate lashback, right, where we saw community members answer with ongoing protests, marches, a hunger strike, and other demonstrations against against school closures. And I think most of us, on this call, and I think most of us in general, can really agree that school closures is not something that we want to do. Um, but I think that's kind of the purpose why we're having this conversation right now. It's like, is it beneficial to have school closures, or is it really hurtful to have school closures, and or what's the middle stance, right? And I think that's a great conversation for us to have right now. That being said, let's jump into this first question that I have for you guys. All right. So there are definitely two arguments, right, on school closures. One is against school closures, right, and one is for school closures. Some people support school closures. So my first question is like, what's everyone's initial thoughts, right? And before you guys answer that, I have a few quotes that I got from different news sites, and it really expresses like the community, right? The community's concerns and the community's thoughts on this. So the first one that I'm gonna show up on here, the first one is closing schools where most Black children are failing to read at grade level. It's difficult but rational decision. All right, so that's a quote that is, in support of what's going on in Oakland right now. Another one that I'm going to show is the quality of education inside classrooms is more important than how close they are to home. All right, another quote that is in support of school closures, and we definitely always want to have both sides, right? So this next one is one that's against school closures, right? So if you truly care about students' mental health, then prioritize their well-being, prioritize these relationships and connections that make them feel safe. And in addition, the community voted you into positions of power because they had faith in you all to make the decisions that benefit and represent them. But these school closures do the complete opposite. All right. So that being said, I really want to pass the mic to whoever wants to take it first and get your initial thoughts. Carla, you want to take a stab at it first?
Yeah, I was trying to unmute. I think that school closures are they're just a very sensitive topic, especially closing schools around, like neighborhoods where they serve like neighborhood kids. It'll like totally like displace like amounts of like children and their parents, and it will just complicate things like a lot more. One of the schools that that are closing in the next 5 years is Gormatsu. My sister went there, and the only reason she attended there was because it was like 5 minutes away from my house, and the reason being was because my mom couldn't find a way of transportation to another school. So I think about like our situation and how hard it was just for my mom to kind of figure that out, and like how many other like students and many other like families are going to be displaced the same way, and they're just going to be like, well, sorry, we're closing your school, like you must find a way to now care for your like child's education and kind of finding a transportation to where you wanted them to go because this one is closing. So while I do think that I'm initially thinking that it's a good thing that they may close like some schools that are not working anymore, it'll like vastly displace a lot of students, especially students of color who are served by this school. So I'm a little like icky on the side of like not closing them. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely love that argument. And like somebody else want to jump in first, and then I think we can come back and just also like talk a little bit about all three of the arguments together. Not arguments, but how y'all feeling.
Yeah, I can definitely go next. So, just as Carla was saying, I'm also, torn apart, in the sense that I heavily sympathize with the families that are affected by the school closures, and the mergers and everything that's happening in our community right now, because, one of the schools is the schools that my little brother attends. And just as Carla was saying, like, it's going to be a lot of students that are going to be displaced, that, you know, they're going to lack transportation. They're going to, you know, lack that school that was a part of their community, right? These schools are serving Black and brown students that are in underserved communities. But the reasoning, or like the detail behind that, is that these schools were also underperforming, right? And it's just a sad reality here in Oakland that we have so many schools in our low income Black and brown communities that are underserving our students, right? They don't have enough resources. So it's like, how deeply will you know, this, apart from like not being able to attend a school that's local, how much more of a deep impact does it have to attend a school that isn't serving your student, that isn't setting your student up for success, and that doesn't have the resources necessary in order to ensure that that student is successful? And I think that I'm a strong believer in quality schools, but I also believe in like understanding what the community needs most. And I think that it puts, you know, everyone in a really tough position to say like, hey, like, we need these schools, like, they're part of our communities, but also like, what has the district been doing, you know, wrong for, you know, as many generations as we can think of, that, you know, are like basically putting our students in a loophole where they aren't able to be successful or be where they want to be in their educational career, right? So I think it is a very difficult topic, and I think you know, it's really something to think about, especially because it's affecting a whole bunch of people in Oakland, and most of those people are underserved communities.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I'm gonna pass it on to Benjamin. And you know, Benjamin, you even said in the beginning that you personally experienced, you know, going through a school closure yourself, right? So definitely, like, tell us about that experience, because I mean, I can't speak that for myself. Like, I never got to experience that, you know, thankfully. But there's a lot of youth in Oakland who are facing that, and I can imagine how difficult and even discouraging it may be for them, right? So, Benjamin, do you want to give us, you know, your experience and how that really was for you and also your family, just going through that process?
Yeah, definitely. So my elementary at the time was called Millsmont. So I remember like they wanted to close our school. I think it was underperforming, but at the same time, like I remember like how many parents were involved and how stressed they were. It also caused like so much stress on us students, like knowing that that school is our closest to home, and we didn't know if we are gonna see our friends again or our teachers that we really had bonds with since elementary. I mean, since kindergarten. So yeah, like I could relate to that because it brought a lot of stress to our family and all that.
Awesome. Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, I mean, I think all three of us are in very like similar positions, right? Like, and I think it's like, you know, we're gonna talk a little bit more about this throughout this, you know, podcast and conversation. But I think what is like most beneficial to our students is going to be like the main question, because you know, is it beneficial to close schools down that are underperforming, right? Or is it like just overall not beneficial because we're displacing a lot of these students and families from the schools that they, you know, went to? That a lot of those schools are probably around the block from their house, right? And there's a lot of students who walk to school every day. You know, living in Oakland's tough as it is, and some parents can't afford to take their children to school because of they got to work, they got to put food on the table for their families. You know, they got to provide, right? So I think there's always like two arguments, right? And let's just continue with the conversation for now, and see, you know, how, you know, how we feel about the next question. But before that, anybody want to make a last comment on this section, this question?
I just want to say quickly, like, I think I do agree with what Stephanie was saying. I think that it's just looking at like the long term like effects of school closure. It's kind of like sacrificing the downsides that are going to happen temporarily versus the downsides that are going to affect like our children, like generations from now. I think we've seen that like a lot of schools haven't been working for a while, and yet, you know, we keep trying and trying and trying because we're so afraid of displacing, you know, a lot of students. But in reality, like that is like a very like eye-opening point where it's like it's kind of sacrificing, the downsides of what can happen now versus like how much is this little, like letting this little effect go, how much is that going to snowball into a bigger effect, and kind of like, again, like setting our children like up for failure again, like younger students up for failure, and then the cycle just repeats itself.
Mhm.
So I think that was a very like good point. I just wanted to like shine some light into it. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's go ahead and move into the next question. I think a lot of these same topics are going to come up, right? So for this next question, we want to go into well, the topic of this question for one is too many schools, not enough students, right? So I'm going to share with you three some data that I got from Dr. Charles Cole. So he actually leads his own podcast, and I got a chance to tune into it for a bit. And in his podcast, he shared a report of the OUSD structural depth closing Black schools from education resource strategies. All right, and this report was done in 2016. And basically, like, this is a big data report, but what really stuck out to me from this data was that the OUSD operates a larger school portfolio, like compared to other districts, in California and even especially around us, right? So think of it like this, right? The OUSD has 24.4 schools for every 10,000 students. All right. Now, this doesn't sound too crazy right now, right? But when we think about the median, when in California, the median is actually 14.4 schools for every 10,000 students. So that's like almost half more schools for every 10,000 students here in Oakland, right? And in addition to that, what we see in a lot of our schools, mainly more like mainly we see this more like in elementary and middle schools, right? We see that there's so many schools and they're serving less than the prerequisite of 350 students per each school, right? So now, like now my question towards you three, right, is like now that you know this data, one, how does it sit with you? But also, like, why do you think the community emphasizes on keeping schools open, especially when some of these are extremely underperforming, or when we just have way too many schools for the students who are going to fill those seats in? All right. So that being said, like that's the question. Let me pass it on to Stephanie this time and have you take the lead on this question, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you, Javi. So yeah, for starters, I'm really like, it really makes me think hard about, what education is like in Oakland. I think that we have so many schools, right? But then if you think about it, a lot of these schools are underperforming. So it's like, who allowed for so many schools to be open, without the resources that it needed to have successful students, to have teachers that have enough support, and to have extra resources for the students, right? So like what prompted the district to think that it was okay to have so many schools but not provide them with enough resources, or enough representation on the district's part, enough aid, enough help, right? And I do think like that it's just really hard to think about, especially in the scenario that we're in right now, because the schools that they're closing, it was such like an abrupt notice, right, to the community. It's like these schools have been here for generations, right, and they've been teaching students in our low income Black and brown communities for years, and they have been closed down despite being underperforming, and despite not having enough resources. So it's like stripping the community away from that is kind of like such an abrupt change. So of course the community is going to feel some sort of way, towards school closures, like it, and they have a complete right to feel that way, because it's like it's their community, it's their like people have graduated these schools, they've attended these schools, and for those schools to just suddenly shut down because they're underperforming makes no sense, right? It does make sense, but like it would make no sense to that community. So I do think that the community, has a right to feel that way. But I also think like who is taking accountability in this scenario, right? Because it's like we're going to close down these schools that are little, because every student has a different learning style. Not every student learns the same. So it's like some students do benefit from that smaller community, right? From that smaller school, from the smaller population of students that attend there, from the student to teacher ratio, because there can be interpersonal relationships that can, be more straightened in that way. But I think, like, in a way, if these students, attend these underperforming schools and the teachers, don't have enough resources, of course they're going to be underperforming. But sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I was gonna make a point about, like, who is taking accountability in this case? Like, are our representatives doing enough, and are they doing it in the best interest of the community, or are they doing it for an ulterior motive or for something else, right? And that's what I think angers the community and angers me, because it's like, why has this been going on for generations if these schools aren't actually providing results, aren't actually, bringing out success rates, or supporting their students, not because they don't want to, but because they don't have enough resources, as well as, like, I think, how can we in the future, like, if once these schools close down, who's going to be responsible for all the students that are leaving those schools and attending the bigger schools, the schools that have a lot more students there? How are we going to support those students, and how are we going to make sure that they have those resources, that they establish connections with their teachers, and that they feel comfortable at this new school? Because it's like an abrupt change, and it's just very challenging for not only the student, but also for the community as a whole.
Yeah, and Carla, that was great, and I think you're even going into the next question a bit as well, right? So we're also gonna talk a little bit about that, like what's gonna happen like to these students, right? Of course, they're gonna be sent to a new school, but like is like who's gonna be held accountable for and making sure that these students go to another school and they're not gonna go through this whole process again, right? So you're briefly touching on that next question, Stephanie. So that being said, um, let's just put a pause there and then jump to Benjamin. How are you, Benjamin? How are you feeling about this question?
Uh, yeah, definitely. Like, I agree with Stephanie. Like, what actions could have been taken so that these schools don't go underperform? But like at the same time, like, why wasn't this done? And yeah,
Awesome. So when you say like why wasn't this done, like what do you think? I mean, this is like it could be a very difficult question, right? But like, what do you think could have been done to maybe like help with like the underperforming, right? Or even like to not have these school closed. Like, what do you think could have been done?
like definitely like encouraging the students to stay after school and do like study halls, or like help them learn more. Like spend more time with them, teaching them. Like as Stephanie said, how some of them have different ways of learning. Like spend more time with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Benjamin. How about you, Carla?
I think firstly, I was very like shocked hearing that we're like 10 points up from like the whole state, because Oakland, yeah, it's small, but it's mighty, right? We know Oakland's small and mighty, but to have that many schools and they're not even serving like the bare minimum, like 350 like amount of students, I think it's just very shocking, because then we all just have all this like empty buildings that money is like going to keep them updated, where instead that money can go into the schools that are actually working for kids, the schools that are giving results, the schools that don't have resources but they should. And then I think the main reason why maybe community may be a little started on letting them go, I think that these schools may hold some type of emotional like they just have like an emotional spot for certain community members, because obviously like a lot of these people that are kind of emphasizing or supporting the like not closing schools are parents. Our parents who in their stories they say, oh, I went to this middle school, my cousin went to this middle school, my sister went to this middle school, we all grew up in this school. And it's like, well, that may be understandable, it worked maybe for you at the time, but is it working for your kid the way that it should? Maybe not. And so the only reason that I feel like a lot of people are so like it's so hard to let like these schools go is because they hold an emotional, I guess, like emotional spot in their community, but don't realize that instead of being like a help to the community, it's kind of a burden. Because then, like I said, like there is money going into that school that should be going to a school that's better performing. It should be going to a school that doesn't have enough resources, but has the amount of students that, you know, they need. So it's like, it's very difficult on like seeing how the community reacts, even though something it's failing. And, you know, they would throw like, not even throw, they just would suggest to like policymakers, like, what if we do this? What if we do that? But it's like, you know, we've tried so much at this point. It's kind of like you need to like give it up in some ways. It's a really harsh truth to say it and to say it that way and to express it that way. But at the same time, it's like if it's been an ongoing issue and it can't be fixed, there is no way that it's going to be fixed in the next 5 years, because then again we circle back in this loop. And those are the same people that are asking, well, where are the results for my kids? Why can't this school be better? Why can't we have more resources? And it's because schools like this are kind of holding back the opportunity for the others. And I think it's just very I think it's also I forgot my train of thought. I think it's just also very angering just seeing again like who's taking accountability for all of this. And I know that's part of the third question, but like, you know, literally like who allowed these people to open this many schools? Like, why does one small neighborhood, for example, need to have two like schools in proximity? Like I used to live like right by like the end of Oakland, and there was like 5 different like schools within like a mile of each other, within a mile radius. One of them again being Korematsu, like it was just there was one and there was another one and then there was another one. And I was like, whoa, like there are so many schools concentrated here. But then again, you see one is doing so great and then the other one's failing. And then you start to think about why, you know, and again, it's sometimes like the hold that the community has on that certain school. And again, like the fear of displacing many students. But it's, you know, it's the harsh truth and the reality. If a school doesn't work, it needs to be shut down. Resources need to go to those that are actually working and that are helping our students be set up for success instead of for failure, because we can't keep repeating the same and same story, the same cycle every school year, in which we see that, oh, our kids are not doing as well, or they transfer schools and then they're doing bad because their previous school didn't help them as they should be. So it's like, you know, it's the harsh truth, it's the harsh reality, but they should be shut down if they are not giving results as they should.
Awesome. Thank you, you three. And I think one I want to put up a quote before we go into the third question. Carla, I know we're gonna lose you in a bit. So before you go, I'm gonna give you 2 minutes to do like a quick closing remark before you go. But I want to show you guys this quote. And I also again found this quote through one of the news sites, and I just thought it was important. So the quote says, "Money is spread too thin across too many schools, leaving students without the resources that they need to read and write." And I think this goes into like Oakland has resources. Okay, like there's a lot of money in Oakland. Oakland has money, and I think one of the issues that you know we see right now is that there's too many schools. And I think one of the things that also is very important to me, and this might sound out the blue, but it's like one of the arguments from teachers, right, is that teachers don't get enough pay. And not just teachers, but a lot of people say teachers don't get enough pay, which I believe is true. Like I think teachers should be getting paid a lot more. One of the reasons why this is impossible is because there's too many schools. Like imagine if we have 4 schools that could really be one bigger school, right? And those teachers, instead of getting paid, and this is an example, right? I'm not really sure how much they get paid at the moment, but say one is like getting paid 35,000, right? Which is like probably, I doubt it, right? It might be like a part-time pay, but 35,000, and say instead of getting 35,000, if it's only 4 schools and one of the teachers there is getting paid 35,000, if it goes to one, that's gonna change. That teacher's gonna be able to get paid more because now there's more resources. But not just for teachers, but also when it comes to like this for the students as well, like other resources that can really be put to benefit other tutors, other reading assistants, writing assistants, right? Like whatever kind of tutors that the school may need to really help with the education as a whole for these students and for the school. So I really want to see like how do y'all feel about this quote? What resonates with y'all? And it's gonna be like whoever wants to jump in. We don't have to spend too much time on this part, but whoever wants to jump in and has an opinion on this.
I think we should let Carla go first, because you know she has to head out in a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I think that again, I think this quote is like very true, and it's very like to the core of the problem, because like I said before, like there's just so many schools that are like underperforming, and yet like a vast amount of like the budget's like going towards them, and it's like, okay, we're giving you the resources, but where's your result? And it's like it's just, I think it's basic math. Like the more that you spread your total into small little portions, the smaller the amount that each portion is going to have. And I totally agree with you that if we were to close down those schools, well, some teachers in like, well, the teachers that were hired to the schools that are closing will be displaced, and maybe they may find themselves, like unemployed for a while. I think it's again this idea of sacrificing a temporary problem for a long-term problem, because again, like if we keep the schools open and these, because we're afraid of displacing people, we're afraid of firing teachers or A or B reason, then that just, I get that just snowballs into this cycle again, and then we're back into square one, and then we won't ever see any results. We need to make sacrifices to see growth. Like we always have to cut something off of our lives to see something greater. Like, and I think that it's just that the community has to come together and kind of realize the bigger benefit of closing some of these schools, to see how much more benefit, like it can, how much more benefit it can have like on the long term. And I really hope that like the community are able to see this, and again, like keep continuing to keep these people that are in power accountable for what they're doing. Remember that they work for you for the benefit of reviewing your students, so it's like keep them accountable and realize that the short-term problems are like way better than long-term problems that are just going to set up students for failure again. Yeah.
Awesome. That was great, Carla. Thank you so much. That being said, we'll let you. Carla has to jump off because she has a class, Miss College student. But we'll let you jump off, Carla. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed every single one of your opinions, and I will be looking forward to hearing this entire thing. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Have a great night. Bye.
Hey, Carla.
Hi, Carla.
Cool. Any thoughts on this quote before we move on to the next question?
Yes. I do want to agree with what Carla was saying. Kind of just kind of just like, we don't want to keep having this this cycle continue where we have too many schools, not enough resources. These schools don't have enough money, and they're underperforming. I know that when I transferred from my public school to my public charter school, as soon as I got there, I heard about, the renewal plan that my school had to go through in order not to get shut down. And it's something that they go through every 5 years as a public charter school, kind of to just see that they meet all the expectations that the district has, when it comes to success rates and results in regards to school data and how students are doing at those schools, right? And I think really, it's scary to go through something like that, to know that your school is at risk of being closed down. But I think that, I question really like why is it that public charter schools that are, that some are very well performing, that they have to experience that every 5 years, but a traditional school doesn't. It's like how can we hold every school accountable, the district accountable, the representatives accountable, and just the educational system accountable? I think when it comes to money, you have to think like, where does education stand in the priority list of the district, of the state? And, how much funding are we actually putting towards that? If we aren't prioritizing it, it's like we're not prioritizing our kids, right? Because these are Black and brown students in low income communities. We're not talking about students that attend a private institution that can afford a private institution education from elementary to high school. It's like they have their pathway set up for them. They have those resources. We're talking about Black and brown students in our communities, in our neighborhoods, our neighbors, ourselves, it's like, how does the district, the state, and the city see us in their priority list? And how can we hold them accountable truly to show that, like, hey, like we're doing this as a result of like underperforming results, but we can assure you that your student will be successful at this new school. We assure you that we'll support you with transportation. We assure you that there will be some sort of system in order to alleviate any kind of stress that your family might endure due to the abrupt change. And I think like, like budgetary issues, it shouldn't be a factor that plays into somebody's education, into a kid's education, into a kid's future. And I think that messing with that is unacceptable. Like altering that or affecting that in a negative way is unacceptable. So if the district thinks that, they're going to close down schools and not be held accountable or, be pushed in order to see better results in our communities, they're wrong. And that's why I think it's so important that our community understands, all the information, all the facts. Because I do agree with Carla on some part that, it does play like some emotional, it does have some emotional, factor when it comes to closing down schools. And that's because we're humans, right? These are our schools that you're talking about closing down. But also it's like, once you look at all the factors, all the facts, like it really like changes your mind, and it really has you thinking like, wow, like this has been going on for so long. It's barely being addressed, and it's being addressed in a negative way. Of course, there's going to be a clapback to that, a response to that. And I just think like holding people accountable, making amends when it comes to students' education, to families that are really going to take a hit with this, with these school closures and mergers, is something that the district should prioritize. I think looking into the future, it's like, if this continues and they continue to close down schools, it most definitely is just like a district problem, and like them having issues with not knowing how to control their money and their budgeting. But like if not, and we actually see like, because we haven't projected this, right? We don't know the result of closing down schools, but I do hope that it has a positive impact, despite, already causing some damage and not having more collateral damage due to doing this.
Yeah, and I think one one point that really stuck out to me right now, Stephanie, was, you're talking about like, one is like charter schools are really held account, like public charter schools are held super like to high standards, right? Like if there's any little thing that is like not looking well, or is even like kind of like looking towards a school being underperforming, they're gonna be put on the hot seat, and they're gonna be held accountable. So why is it that there hasn't been that same accountability held for some of our district schools? I think we can all agree that, at least we can all agree on this chat right here where we're at, is that we want quality schools all across Oakland. Like we want each and every single school to be, when we think about A through G, right? We want each and every student to be A through G eligible. Even if at the moment they don't want to go to college as a freshman, for example, if they don't want to go to college, but we still want them by the end of their senior year to be A through G eligible. That way, if they wish to go to college, they can go do it, right? Or for even middle or elementary, like we want to make sure that all our students are at grade level when it comes to reading and writing. Like right now, it's super bad when we think about students like when the percentage of students who are actually reading at grade level, and I think it's really low. I think like at 10 to 20%, which is like crazy, right? So why is it that it takes so much for schools to be held accountable, right? Especially schools from our district. I think that's a big like question, like why is it so hard? And now that it actually happened, right, in some sense, like some of these schools that are underperforming are closed, we're seeing the community really push against it. And I think, they have every right to do so. But I think, what are we trying to keep open, like schools that are underperforming, or are we actually trying to make a difference in the education of students, especially those students who are already, put a couple steps behind just because of their color of the skin when it comes down to, right? If they're black or brown, it's already even that much more difficult. So I think it's just a question, right? Benjamin, you want to add anything on this, or are you ready to move on? How do you feel?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. Like, makes sense how like it would be better if we'll get like a quality education instead of like we're just done. The charter schools are just done mostly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this goes to say, right? I mean, I think I'll end this piece with this is like, personally, like, I don't care if it's a traditional public school or if it's a public charter school. If it's underperforming, I think that school should be closed. Period, point blank, right? Doesn't matter. It can be a charter school, and I mean, I'm an alumni of a charter school, right? If it's a charter school and I feel like it's underperforming, I'm sorry, but there's no reason to keep it open. Like, the whole purpose of a school, even a charter school, right? The whole purpose of the charter school was to create a better education, right? But even that being said, like, there's no point of keeping the school open if they have our students at 20%, like reading at grade level, or 35, 40%, 50%, even 60%, right? 60% a little better, but even 60% of students who aren't A through G eligible, right? And aren't going to be able to go to college because they're not A through G eligible. So that being said, I mean, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had at a much bigger scale that sometimes just isn't happening. Um, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the next question. And for this one, I think Carla, I mean, Stephanie, you briefly jumped into it a bit, and you kind of hit it right now in this last question as well. But with so many schools being closed, right? Because it's a good amount, or being merged, or their middle school programs being cut. Like, there's gonna be a lot of children who are gonna be displaced, and that's one big, like, stance and argument towards it. Uh, like, I think one big question is like, what is going to be the effect of this experience for students? Like, it's gonna be traumatizing for some, and even like Benjamin was kind of talking a little bit about it. Like, it can be discouraging. It can be stressful. Like, some students are in class thinking about where they're gonna go next year, right? But I think the question that is really important that comes out of this is like, what does it truly mean? All right, what does it truly mean to put our children first? And I think every parent, are going to speak for their own children, right? But I think like even for us looking at our community, like, what does it mean to put students first? Um, does it mean allowing children to go to schools that are underperforming and they're not serving them to their fullest potential, right? And kind of keeping that cycle going, like Carla kind of talked about, or does it mean holding these schools accountable for underperforming and closing them down, or if it's not closing them down, figuring something else to do, figuring something else that we can do to kind of change the pathway that has been going on for so many years of underperforming, right? So, and I think another question that goes into this is like, how are we going to make sure that now that these schools are closing, right? Like, how are we going to make sure that these students who are in these schools that are closing, how are we going to make sure that they don't go to another school and this same experience doesn't happen, right? And that that they go to a school that they're actually going to have a better education at, that they're actually going to be working towards getting to reading that grade level, right? And or if it's high school, like making sure that they're A through G eligible once they graduate. So, what are your thoughts? What does it truly mean to put children first?
Uh, so I think what my meaning of putting the children first is like, if you're gonna close the school, at least like if it's either through Zoom or keeping them at school until they find another school to go to. And like I think that would be like a good put our children first. And also like I know like some students, like I said, they're gonna be discouraged and all that, but you just hope that they get tutored like at school and even like at home, like held the parents accountable by helping them, or the parents like are seeking to help the teachers for the students.
I really like that. I mean, I think that's gonna have to, it's gonna be necessary to do that, right? Like, um, I think tutors are really going to play a big part, especially when they go to this new school, right? Like, there's going to have to be tutors who are set for those students to either catch them up, right? Because some schools may be a little more behind than others, right? So even for example, like transitioning from eighth grade to high school, right? Some students go into high school like way behind, and they have to like even participate in a summer program to catch up for their freshman year, right? So I think it's super important to like to realize and also note that there's gonna have to be tutors or other teachers to really help in that process, but also Benjamin, like you said, parents like it's something that's very difficult, and I think it's difficult for parents to sometimes make the time for it, right? But I think parents are going to play a role in this process as well. What do you think? What do you think of Stephanie?
Oh yeah, I agree with you guys on that. I think tutors, parents being involved. But I just wanted to touch a little bit before I get more into that, what you said, Javi, about like really how are we gonna make sure that our students are a priority? And it's crazy to think about because education is lawfully required. So we want our students to attend schools that where they're actually, you know, going to be able to fulfill what they want to do for their future. So just as you guys were saying, like once these schools do close down, it's going to be something that everyone has to be involved with and something that everyone is, in support of, in the sense that everyone has to act like a resource. I think that, having teachers that truly care about their students in the classroom is essential. Having representatives that truly care about, the students first is essential. So when it comes to elections, actually informing yourself on like what kind of person is going into office and is going to represent my district, my child, and making sure that they're always like doing things in the best interest of the students is really important. In the classrooms, they're probably going to be a lot more packed than they were before. So I think providing those online not online, those after school resources, those after school programs, investing into things like that, investing into extracurricular programs, investing into, updated textbooks, all of this is something to take into consideration. Transportation is something that will be extremely important because these schools probably won't be as close as they were, prior to closing them, right? The students might have to take some time to get to that school now. So we really need to support the community, these families, and to ensure that their student is successful. Because what if we do all this and we allow these schools to underperform, to not have the resources that they need for all the incoming students? It's like everything will be done for nothing, right? This whole thing was, a screw up for our communities. So I really want us to hold people accountable, keep ourselves informed, and kind of, not be, so negative, in the sense that, there's always a positive aspect to everything. If you are open-minded to it and if you are willing to adapt to that change. I know it can be very challenging, but it's really important that, we're adaptable. And I think that that is a life skill. And I think that it's really unfortunate, the circumstances that we're being forced into, but it's just something that is our reality today. So I really hope the best. And I really, really ask for accountability and resources for these new schools, especially because it's something that was so unexpected and something that I think that the community, should have had some time to plan, or should have been told in advance. But it's just a reality of things, and I think that this is what should be provided going on forward.
Awesome. You went deep right now, Stephanie. You went deep. Thank you. And I think, like, there's something that came to my thought. Well, if it comes back, I'll bring it up. But that being said, I think what we're ready to do right now is go into our closing thoughts. Sound good? Sound good with you too? Yeah. So, you know, I think one big question right now is what does it mean for our community, right? Especially at times when board members are being harassed. All right. Board members are being harassed, which is like crazy to me, right? That's one thing to be at a board meeting and kind of, talking to them and stuff. But I think going to their house and actually attacking where they live is a bit extra and a bit too much, in my opinion, right? I think it's like we still gotta. Well, I'm gonna let y'all give y'all first thoughts on this, right? So, and because some of the board members are getting their property damaged, right? So, what would you guys want to say, right, for your closing thought? What would you want to say to other students, teachers, and community members about what is currently happening right now?
Yeah, like at the end of the day, just remember they're humans. They have feelings too, even though their actions like affect us. They're doing it for some reason, but at the end, yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, like they still have feelings.
Go first, Stephanie.
Okay, no, yeah, I agree with Ben. But do you mean like in regards to what's happening with the harassment and all that, or in regards just to the whole issue?
I say the whole issue. Let's make it open. I mean, I think definitely if you want to touch on a little bit about like the harassment part, but I
Yeah.
think like as a whole, like what do you want to tell? Like everything that's going on, what would you want to tell other students, teachers, and community members about it?
Okay. I think in regards to the harassment, I think that is like a completely separate issue. I don't think it's okay, and I don't think it's acceptable, right? It's like, I do understand, all the pain and everything, but I do think that it's like a completely separate issue. It has to do with like respect and morals. Despite, how sensitive and how provoking this issue might be, I think that it's something that we should always uphold respect in Oakland, and just, towards the whole issue, I think that we should all just stand in solidarity, and really, as a community, teachers, students, parents, support one another, and continue to advocate for what we need, because despite this being like in this scenario inevitable because of what we've seen, like despite like having seen like families fight back, it's going to happen regardless. So I think just standing in solidarity, being supportive of one another, and being more understanding and empathetic towards everyone. We don't know what's happening in another person's life, and especially right now that this is happening, like, it'll affect many students and many families. But we do definitely have to stick together and love one another. I think that, in moments of chaos and of not chaos, but like, of moments of uncertainty, the best thing you can do is love one another, and continue to fight and advocate for what you truly believe in. And more power to everyone, to the youth and to families.
Yeah, definitely agree with this, Stephanie and Benjamin. I think, like you said, I think we have to stand, in solidarity, right? I think it's okay and it's perfect. It's perfectly normal for us to have like disagreements, right? I think it's perfectly normal for there to be two sides. I think it's normal for there to be somebody who opposes it and somebody who's in support of it. I think what we can't go out and do is attack other people because of that, because our opinions don't align, right? And I think that kind of goes to, even what's going on right now, right? I think we have to be understanding about what's going on right now, even though it's very difficult. I think we have to give it a chance. And you said it, Stephanie, like we have to be open minded about it. It's something that, I mean, it's something that's not new, right? School closures happen all across the state. Like it happens a lot. But for some reason here in Oakland, it's very like out the ordinary when it happens, and when it does, like it really alarms people, right? People are alarmed, and this is both like traditional public schools and public charter schools. Like it happens in both. Like people, if somebody's to close, your school, Stephanie, right now that you're in high school, you're gonna be like, oh, whoa, what's going on? And you're gonna want to advocate for it, right? So I think everybody has each and every right to advocate for their school that's being closed, and advocate for your children's education. And I think also, like, let's try to be understandable about it and see, like, and give it a shot. Like, let's see what happens, because it might just turn out for the best. And hopefully what happens is that more resources will be accessible for other schools. And the school that your child might go to right now is going to be closed, but the resources from his school are going to go to the school that he's going to now, right? Because the money follows the student when it comes down to it, right? So if more money is being there's going to be more money being set aside, more resources are being set aside for that school, it might work out for the benefit of the children and all children, right? So I say we should be open-minded, like you said, Stephanie, and let's give it a shot. Any more closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to agree with you on that, Javi. Just, the money follows the student. I think if there was, in an ideal place, if there was a way to like have like an individualized support system for every student, that would be like the best thing. But I think that, we should have a list of every student that will be moving into a new school, and, support them the first year, the first couple of months in that transition, and kind of just check in with those families. And I think it has more to do with like, hey, like, what are we going to do to improve the educational system?
Yep.
I think, any school can be a good school for a student if it has enough resources, and if, we're actually prioritizing that student's education and supporting them unconditionally.
Yeah, like I agree with her. Like, just take it as a learned lesson and try to prevent it, like by taking actions and all that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you two. Really want to appreciate. I know it's a Friday night, and I think it's the first Friday of the month, so it's first Friday out. Thank y'all for being here instead of that first Friday, wherever whatever engagement y'all gonna be on tonight. But yeah, but let's go ahead and wrap it up. This is gonna be the first of hopefully many podcasts that we do here with Families in Action, with some of our amazing FIA leaders, and hopefully even some of our the organizations that we collaborate with. That being said, please go ahead and tune in for the next episode as we talk about A through G and its importance. All right, so A through G is a big topic. You might see Stephanie and Benjamin again. You might see some other folks. We're gonna try to do a good job and get a whole bunch of people on this podcast and make sure we continue to create a platform for some of our amazing youth and parents in our community. That being said, thank you so much, you two, and thank you all who watched.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Javi. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.